الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا مولانا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا قائد الغر المحجلين وشفيع المذنبين وسيد ولد آدم ولا فخر محمد عبد الله الهاشمي القرشي وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين وبعد. So alhamdulillah, we continue to read from the book of Al-Fath al-Rabbani wa al-Fath al-Rahmani Sayyidi Muhyiddin Abd al-Qadir al-Jilani, the Mujaddid and renewer of the 6th century of the Hijrah of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in our daily sessions thus far, we have gone over a number of topics, and they are included in these 62 discourses of the Shaykh that he had given at various times throughout the city of Baghdad in the middle of the 6th century, around the year 545 or so, and a couple of years thereafter. So we're gonna, as we said before, some of these are a little bit shorter than others. So in this session, I think we'll cover 2 of them. So those would be those who are following along, if you have a book with you, either in Arabic or English, that would be the 7th and 8th discourses, al-Majlis al-Saba, afwan, the 8th and 9th discourses. So al-Majlis al-Thamin wa al-Tasi', so the 8th and 9th discourses that we're going to read from. And in the first one, the 8th one, the general topic is what's called al-Mura'ah, or al-Nifaq, or al-Shirk al-Asghar. So he's going to talk about kind of purification of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it seems that, especially during the time of Sayyid Abd al-Qadir al-Jilani, there were quite a number of people who wore the cloak of piety, who even wore the cloak of mashayikha, which is that they acted and like a sheikh, sheikh al-tarbiyah that we're talking about, a sheikh who can take on disciples and students and oversee their spiritual progress. And as we know, that thing is true and it's haqq, and there are true murabbiyin, people who can do that. But there are also many charlatans, and there are also many people who make claims to that. And Sayyid Abd al-Qadir is saying, just because someone kind of has the general outfit, not just clothing, but speaks in the manner that one would expect of a sheikh, or acts in the manner, does not necessarily make them so. It's something that's an eternal state. And sometimes this is referred to as the shirk al-asghar, or the lesser shirk. It's not a shirk of kufr. It doesn't put someone outside of Islam, because there's 2 types of doing things or ostentation or other from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's nifaq al-aqidah and there's nifaq al-amal. So the hypocrisy of creed means you actually don't believe in the Prophet ﷺ, and you may not even believe in Allah, may not even believe in God, but you carry yourself as if you do for some type of specific gain. And this category of people is mentioned in the Quran many times. There's 13 verses in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, the 2nd surah of the Quran in terms of its not chronological order, but how it's put in the Quran in terms of the textual or the scriptural order. And those 13 verses refer to munafiqi al-aqidah. It refers to the people who are hypocrites of aqidah, the ones who say that we are with you, but if they go back to their people, yastahzi'un, right, as the Quran mentions. So he's not talking about that category. He's talking about those who have nifaq of al-amal. In other words, you intend the deed for Allah, perhaps, but also there's shirk in the intention. So not shirk in your faith and your belief, right? That would be outside of Islam, but a type of shirk or polytheism. It's not really polytheism. It's kind of a let's call it a poly-intention, because it's not about how you view God. You're not actually seeing more than one God, but your heart betrays that fact in the way that you are seeking people's approval or people's praise or something from them, by the particular deeds that you do. And so we've mentioned also one of the signs of someone who is not a true da'i, or who is not a very sincere da'i, or a caller to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or someone who's a shaykh, is that they call to themselves, or they call to their tariqah, or they call to their way, or they call to their madhab, or they call to their jama'ah, or they call to anything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what was the sifa, the attribute that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Quran? وَدَاعِيًا إِلَى اللَّهِ بِإِذْنِهِ وَسِرَاجًا مُنِيرًا. دَاعِيًا إِلَى اللَّهِ. So the one who invites to Allah. So then the da'wah, the invitation, has to be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to anything else. Not even to that which facilitates your calling to Allah. And this is a common mistake as well, where people form organizations that kind of facilitate this thing, or they have a madrasa, or they have a school, or whatever that is, and that facilitates the invitation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we're inviting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're inviting people not because we seek something from them or anything that's monetary or otherwise, but because we are seeking their own best interests. We have their own best interests at heart. And this is kind of draws on the theme from the previous session, that was the session before this, the idea of al-nasiha, of giving sincere counsel, and also al-mu'minu mir'atul mu'min. The believer is the mirror of the believer. So that means when you look at another believer, you're actually looking at yourself. Much in the same way, when you look at a mirror, you see your image and you don't see the mirror, right? Because that where your image is actually reflected in the mirror, you can't see beyond that. You just see yourself, and then everything around it is the mirror. So in a sense, we're also looking at ourselves, and it's the kind of this vein of altruism and selflessness that much of the akhlaq al-Islamiyya is based upon, that the Muslim and Islamic morals and character traits are based upon this idea of altruism. الَّذِينَ يُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. The ones who give to others, or prefer others over themselves, وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. Even if they themselves may have what others would see as an excuse not to do that, right? They have a khasasa, they have their own difficulties, because oftentimes when we speak in these type of tones, our internal voice will say to us, well, I would love to help out, but I'm not in the mood to help this person out, or I have my own stuff to worry about, but I would like to, but. So all of those sorts of justifications are clearly not justified by the verse in the Quran we just mentioned. الَّذِينَ يُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. The ones who give to others or prefer others over themselves, وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. Even if they have something that would seem as an appropriate excuse not to, but nevertheless, they do so anyway. So we'll read some excerpts, inshallah. He says, رضي الله عنه وعنكم: المرائي ثوبه نظيف وقلبه نجس، يزهد في المباحات ويكسل عن الاكتساب، ويأكل بدينه ما لا يتورع جملة، يأكل الحرام الصريح، يخفي أمره على العوام ولا يخفي على الخواص، كل زهده وطاعته على ظاهره، ظاهره عام وباطنه خراب. So I'm going to read actually directly from the translation that I have. I think it'd be easier. So he calls the Mura'i, Sidi Muhtar Holland, who translated this, rahimahullah, who, by the way, he translated this book very, very well, very excellently, and he has passed on. So we'll read Fatiha for him with the intention that we're benefiting from the translation. Fatiha. He says, the pious pretender, or al-Mura'i, wears clean clothes, but his heart is filthy. He abstains from permissible things and is too lazy to earn a livelihood. He eats off his religion. In other words, he makes his livelihood from his religion. I'm going to explain what that means in a second. And exercises no self-restraint at all. He consumes things that are explicitly forbidden. His game may be hidden from the awam, from the common folk, but it is not concealed from the elite, the khawas, right? Because al-mu'min yanzuru binurillah. ittaqu firasat al-mu'min فإنه ينظر بنور الله. The firasa, or the piercing insight of the believer, is by the light of God. So be careful about that. So this would be for the khawas. His asceticism or his zuhd and obedient worship are all superficial. His external facade is splendidly fashioned, but his interior is a ruin. So this is talking about the mura'i, right, which is to do things, and it comes from ra'a, right, to see. So the mura'i does things so that they can be seen. We find a reference for this in the Quran as well. الَّذِينَ يُرَاءُونَ وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ Surah Al-Ma'un. فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. And this is the only verse, to my knowledge, that is actually giving a warning to people who pray. In all other instances, it says many good things about people who pray, but in the specific verse, a specific type of person, or a person who prays in a specific way, offers a ritual prayer in a specific way. فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. Al-wayl, yani, could mean damnation, it could be to be cursed. To whom? لِلْمُصَلِّينَ, to those who pray. Who are they? الَّذِينَ يُرَاءُونَ وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ. The ones who do it to be seen. وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ. يَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ means they, even when they are asked to offer something that is generally considered to be trivial as a help for someone else, someone knocks on your door and they say, oh, I ran out of salt, or a neighbor, that is, or can I borrow your vacuum cleaner for 5 minutes? And you say, no, can't do it, sorry. But yet they're the ones who pray in the first line in the masjid, and they're the ones who are supplicating towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's something wrong with them, right? Because the fruits of your piety should extend, and everyone should benefit from it. This was the way of our Prophet ﷺ, the greatest person to have ever lived and ever will live. What was his sifa? What was his main attribute? Rahmatun lil alameen. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We have not sent you except as a rahmah, as a mercy for all of the different awalim. So alameen means different worlds. So the world of the ins and the world of the jinn, the world of human beings and the world of the jinn, the celestial world, right? Al-Mala' al-A'la, that is occupied by the angels and occupied by the gentle spirits, and Al-Asfal, right? The terrestrial world, which is occupied by us and the jinn. So he's a mercy to those worlds. He's a mercy to the animals. He's a mercy to the trees. So خيره متعدي. المؤمن خيره متعدي. The believer, their khair, their good, everyone should have some lot of that, should some health. They should feel something of it. So we have fallen into, unfortunately, this kind of sort of bad way of practicing religion sometimes, what I call tadayyun as-salbi, a negative practice of religion, where oftentimes people associate religiosity and piety with intolerance, with coarseness, with a general sometimes lack of civility with other people, judgmentalism. So all of these things have come to be associated with a particular type of practicing the deen, right? And I'm not going to say those people are damned to hell and they're they're not very good Muslims. That's not for us to say, but we can say that in terms of the way that they practice their religion, if it's bringing more offense to people than it is bringing them to think twice or three times about maybe this is something I'd be interested in, then there's something wrong with their practice of the deen. And one of those ayub, right, one of those shortcomings are shortcomings of the soul, and he talks about one of them here, which is al-mura'i or riya. So to do things for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that means the clothes, right, are clean and are well pressed, and he says in a general sense, but inside the heart has all these problems. So there's riya, there's ostentation, there's su'u dhan, there's bad opinion of people, there's sanctimony, thinking you're better than everybody else, there is envy, there's jealousy, there's rancor, there's enmity. All of these things are amrad. They're all types of diseases, and they kind of stain the heart, even though one exterior and outward looks clean. So he may abstain from permissible things, but maybe he's too lazy to earn a livelihood. Here he's talking about certain people back in his time who often were attached or associated with some of the Sufi zawaya, and those zawaya operated with awqaf. They had endowments, so it was kind of like if you can get associated with one of them, you pretty much had free housing and free meals. Maybe not the most luxurious of accommodations or the luxurious of meals, but at least you were covered. But in order to stay in such a place, you have to be someone who is very interested in actually following the program that is set by the waqif, right? The person who made the endowment, and then it's the sheikh who's there, who's going to set the program for you. So sometimes people who are pretenders would come into that sort of thing. So I don't doubt that Sayyid Abd al-Qadir al-Jilani sometimes was addressing these people in his audience, in his majlis. So he's saying how there's a type of something you can't reconcile when you're wara, right? You have this scrupulousness about certain things, about in terms of your outward piety, but you don't even bother to earn a living or to try to fend for yourself and those sorts of things, because those are harder on the nafs than appearing outwardly as appearing as a pious person. That's what he means by he eats off of his religion. So one is kind of subsisting on just people's good opinion of how pious a person you are. And that's what's problematic. And at the same time, not exercising self-restraint. Of course, our Muslim institutions, they need funds and they need to be run well, and they need to have endowments, and we need teachers who are going to teach there, and they need to be taken care of. But what he's talking about here is someone who's just on the basis of their piety. They're not a teacher. They're not someone who's actually providing a service for anybody whatsoever. They're there for their own benefit, but at the same time, they're just there to actually subsist because of their perceived place and their perceived piety in Islam. That's the problem. So that's what he means by he consumes things that are explicitly forbidden or haram. He may not be known by the awam, but the khawas can pick out such a person because يَنْظُرُونَ بِنُورِ اللَّهِ, they see by the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what is the remedy for this type of riya? He mentions it, I think, a little bit later. And one of the things he said is to have a true practice of Tawheed. And a true practice of Tawheed within your heart is that your a'mal, your deeds, become solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there are some practical things in the deen associated with how to go about doing that, and there's also kind of some spiritual remedies associated with that. In terms of the practical things, the hadith that's narrated in Muwatta and other books of hadith, that the best of deeds are those that are done privately, especially prayers, illa al-maktubat or illa al-fara'id. So those things that are done on a voluntary basis, it is best, especially for the murid, for the one who is still kind of setting out on their path, and they're not quite an example for others yet, to do those things privately. So to do the rawatib, for example, which are the prayers that are associated before and after Dhuhr and before Asr and after Maghrib and after Isha and before Fajr, those type of prayers, generally to be done privately, not in front of people. If one has a feeling, an inkling that they might be doing it for people to look at them, for people to see, oh, look, mashallah, that's a pious person, and so forth. So from a practical sense. In terms of sadaqat, yes, the zakat, which is the fard, oftentimes you can't help but to give that outwardly. It is from amongst the sha'a'ir ad-din. It is from amongst those things that are the staple kind of markers of the deen. So everybody knows about Muslims, they give zakat. And so that could be done outwardly. But the sadaqat, which are considered the voluntary acts, the metaphor that's used is such as to give it in a way such as the right hand gives and the left hand doesn't know about it, which is a metaphor for saying to do it privately and not necessarily everyone has to know about it. And these are ways to help one's heart so that they become less attached to what any particular expected outcomes they would have from people about what they should be receiving from them. That's from the practical side. From a spiritual side, one of the things that's mentioned in the Risala al-Qushayriya, for example, of Abu al-Qasim al-Qushayri and other books, is that it doesn't take you to actually be with amongst people to be mura'i. You can have riya even if you're praying in your house by yourself. So sometimes even those practical remedies have limits. How so? Well, if you're praying in your house and as you're praying, you're thinking, oh, if, Hajj Mamdouh in the masjid could see me right now, then he'd think I'm a stand-up guy and he'd be thinking this and this about me. So you're thinking about people seeing you, even though there's actually nobody in the room. Or you give sadaqat and nobody knows about it, but you said, if people only knew that I was doing this, then they think something else about me. So there's still this kind of attachment in the heart to, this particular outcome that you want from people. And some of the shuyukh, the mashayikh in the past, they have used what we would consider today to be kind of very austere and difficult tasks for people. So to break that connection that they have with this dependence upon the accolades and the praise of al-khalq, of people. So sometimes they would have them even go, if they were a prominent alim or scholar. Ibn Ajiba was one of those people. Ahmed ibn Ajiba, who was a later scholar, lived in the 17th century or 18th century. And he was a very prominent scholar in Morocco. And his sheikh told him that, you have a lot of attachment, it seems like, to your students and people looking up to you and thinking this much about you and so forth. So one of the spiritual remedies he recommended, or he had him do, was to take off the scholarly clothes. So, the imamah that the ulama wear, and the jubba and the cloak and all those things, and to wear the tattered clothing of the beggars in the street, and then go beg in the same mosque that he was an imam at, that he used to give lessons at. That's a very, very heavy thing on the nafs, extremely heavy thing on the nafs. But he did it. And then he said afterwards, I entered into kind of a new understanding and a new relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I didn't have access to before. And probably if his sheikh didn't have him do that, we wouldn't be mentioning Ibn Ajiba's name today still, because he would have been still a good scholar and still someone that people listened to and learned from, and learned hadith and tafsir and fiqh and all of the Islamic subjects. But he is considered one of those people, especially in the Shadili silsila, one of the great ulama of that tariq and of that way, and especially in Morocco and Maghrib. And probably if he hadn't done any of that, we would have really not thought much about him, because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of others like that who didn't go to that particular path and was trained in that particular way, like Ibn Ajiba. So now these are the people that their memory still remains and their legacies still remain because of this intense spiritual training they went through. Now, we're not saying that people have to do that today, but everything in its proper parameter. So maybe sometimes we have to get creative with ourselves and think about, well, maybe there's a particular way that I can be less dependent upon people's opinion of me. Maybe I don't have to drive a car that represents the particular socioeconomic class that I belong to, or that I feel I belong to. Maybe I drive something a little bit less, right? And that may seem trivial, maybe seem nothing, but if your heart feels that, if there's a little nudge at your heart and there's a little kind of hesitation when you think about things like this, then that means there's still hirs, right? There's still kind of holding on to something and not letting go completely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Sayyid Abd al-Qadir al-Jilani, he says, if you want to do it right, you have to come completely stripped in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He actually uses the word awriyan, naked. And it doesn't mean naked of your outward clothing, he means naked of your inward clothing. All your pretenses, all of your perceived maqamat that you think you have in life, all of these perceived things that you think you're about, come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and cast all of that aside. Put all of that ala jamb, put it all aside, and come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with your cup completely empty, and then let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill it for you, rather than having all of these expectations and these anticipations and how things should be, and if I do X, Y, Z, then 1, 2, 3 will happen back to me, and so forth. So make your tawheed not just tawheed in everything. And the epitome of tawheed is to see nothing in the wujud, or to see no wujud illa wujudillah. That's kind of the epitome, the apex of it. So not just knowing that Allah is behind everything, but to also know that there really is nothing besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's a sound principle even in Islamic theology, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his existence is unqualified. Our existence is qualified, namely by the will of God. So if Allah didn't will us to be, we would not be. And if he didn't continue to will us to be, we also would not be. So we're only here by the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as long as he wants us here. As soon as he doesn't want us here anymore, in his pre-eternal knowledge, and he knows when that's going to be, we will cease to be. So this is something that it's a tenet of our aqidah, it's a tenet of our Islamic belief, but it should also be a tenet of our spiritual outlook, our spiritual makeup, to actually really have this witnessing of none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or something that we should aim to strive for. And sometimes that takes you to really like have this tajreed and really strip down of all of your pretenses and all of your possessions, and realize they don't mean anything, and they don't add anything to who you are. They do not define you. And then you come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ready for him to actually, he will define you, and he will say that you are Abdullah. Of all the things that Isa ibn Maryam could have said in the cradle, Jesus the son of Mary could have said in the cradle, when he was brought to his people by his mother Mary, Maryam alayhi salam, the first words that came out of his mouth, he said, Inni Abdullah, I am the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or in the greatest moment that has ever happened for any human being that we just talked about a few nights ago, Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, the night of the night trip and the ascension to heaven of our Prophet ﷺ, in both body and spirit. سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى. سبحان الذي أسرى. So عبده. So he was called by Abd. He was called the servant, and this is referring to our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So your goal should to be an Abd, to be a servant, right? Sayyid al-Qawm khadimuhu. The Sayyid, the real true leader, is the one who gives service, is the Khadim, is the one that is able to lower themselves, the one that is able to recognize they have their own shortcomings, and the one who is able, when they get into some sort of fractious confrontation or interaction with someone else, before they blame the other person, they look to themselves and say, it must have been something I did. Not necessarily something I did wrong to that person. Even if they were the instigator, then you could still say it's something I did. Not that I did to them, but maybe something I did with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The awliya, when they did find themselves in this sort of kind of something didn't go right during their day, like they would say, "Lo adabat al-dabba," if my mount, my animal, like was not very cooperative with me, he doesn't get mad at the animal, at the mule or the donkey or the horse or the camel, but he said, I did something in my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is يعني إشارة تنبيه or علامة تنبيه. It's kind of an alarm or a warning Allah has given me to set me straight. So I get right back out of al-jadda. I get right back upon the straight path. Wallahu a'lam. So I'm going to move on to the 9th discourse, which talks about ibtila to some degree, which talks about trial and tribulation, which has been a running theme, as we've seen with Shaykh Abd al-Qadir. He begins by mentioning one of the hadith, or attributed hadith to the Prophet ﷺ, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُعَذِّبُ حَبِيبَهُ وَلَكِنْ قَدْ يَبْتَلِي. And I found a similar hadith to this that is sahih, that is a true hadith, narrated by Imam Ahmad in his Musnad, ala shart al-Shaykhain, which means that following the same rules and criteria that al-Bukhari and Muslim followed, he found this hadith, even though they didn't include it in any of their collections. And just as a side note, just because a hadith is not in Bukhari and Muslim doesn't mean that it's not sahih, doesn't mean that it's not one of the most or more rigorously authenticated hadith. Both Bukhari and Muslim are hadith compilations and summaries. We know that both of them, and Muslim was a student of al-Bukhari, radiallahu anhum, had hundreds of thousands of hadith at their disposal, and that they had memorized from heart. But yet, each one of them only included a small fraction. Bukhari about 7,000, Muslim about 4, a small fraction of, and those including the repeats of the hadith that they had at their disposal. So it was really mukhtarat. They chose specific hadith. There were many other sahih hadith. That's why Musnad Imam Ahmad is bigger, but he has both sahih and hasan and da'if in his collection. So his narration said that on Anas ibn Malik, that they were returning from a particular expedition, and they were traveling with their animals, and then there was a young child like in the way, and a woman saw her son, and a young child in the way, and she said, "Ibni, Ibni," my son, my son. She was worried about, the horses trampling over him or the camels hitting him, and she was able to retrieve him, and so forth. And then the Prophet ﷺ spoke to the Sahaba, and he said, this woman, she would never want anything bad to happen to her son. He said, Wallahi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لا يلقي حبيبه في النار. In other words, it's not done as a method of torture. Allah does not want to put you in the hellfire. And any tribulation that we find here, as mentioned in the version narrated by Shaykh Abd al-Qadir, وَلَكِنْ قَدْ يَبْتَلِي. It's therefore ibtila. So one of the things also that is very important as part of one's spiritual makeup is not to look upon the different trials and tribulations that are happening to them as a punishment from God. Shaykh Abd al-Qadir actually in other works said that if you view it as a punishment, then it is a punishment. It's punishment enough that you think it's a punishment. And he said that you should either treat it, as we've mentioned before, with patience, forbearance, or with rida, which is the higher way, with contentment, because it came from your Habib, your Mahbub, namely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you truly love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then know that whatever He puts in your way, it's as a way to test you so that He can raise you in rank and raise you in degrees, and also maybe to help you along your path so that you get rid of some of your attachments and affiliations that if you were to continue in them, they would bring about a bad result for you, either in this life or in the next life. So we have to believe that about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah does not torment His loved one, but He may well put him to the test. So he says, the believer is secure in the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not make him experience something as a trial unless this result in some benefit, either for this world or for the hereafter. He therefore accepts misfortune cheerfully, bears it with patience, and harbors no resentment against his Lord. His Lord Azza wa Jal keeps him distracted from the affliction. Oh, you are so preoccupied with this world, you should give up discussion of these spiritual stations or maqamat, because you are talking only with your tongues, not with your hearts. You are turning your backs on Allah, on His words, and on His prophets, and their followers in reality, in the haqiqah, those who are their deputies, khulafa, and their trustees, or al-awsiya. You are quarreling with destiny and omnipotence, al-muqaddar wal-qudra. You have contented yourselves with the gifts of creatures instead of the gifts of the Lord of truth and His blessings. Nothing you have to say will be given a hearing by Allah and His righteous servants until you repent. Make your repentance sincere and lasting, and comply with destiny and the divine decree, al-qada wal-qadar, in what is to your advantage and what is to your disadvantage, in that which gives honor and that which is humiliating, in affluence and poverty, in health and sickness, in what you like and that which you dislike. So, as we can see, a running theme here, especially when we talk about tazkiyah and spiritual sciences, is the first pillar of faith, dealing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, also, and then the sixth pillar of faith, al-iman bil-qada wal-qadri, khayrihi wa sharrihi, believing in the qada and qadar, that in the destined divine decree, khayrihi wa sharrihi. So here he's kind of giving us an explanation or discourse on what khayrihi wa sharrihi means. So whether you like it or you dislike it, whether it's health or whether it's sickness, whether it's affluence or whether it's poverty, these are all circumstantial things, right? And they are not indicative of your maqam, of your station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if Allah gives you sickness, that doesn't mean Allah is displeased with you. And if Allah gives you health and wealth, that doesn't also mean that He's necessarily pleased with you. These are things that are circumstances. What are the true alamat, what are the true signs of Allah being pleased with you, is how do you deal with these things, and how do you feel about Him when you are afflicted with something you don't like? Are you still pleased with your Lord? Because if you are, then that means your Lord is pleased with you. So if you want to know your maqam with God, then what is Allah's maqam with you? Where is He in your heart? But if you are a sunshine servant, and you only like when nice things are happening to you, and when good things and health and wealth and ease, and that's how you act favorably towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and otherwise you do not react favorably, then you have to question, do you truly love God? Or do you truly love the ni'mah? Do you truly love the blessings? Or do you truly love al-mun'im, the one who is the bestower of blessings? So whatever circumstance Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in our way, then we should at the very least be patient with it, not see it as a punishment, and see it as a reminder, see it as a ta'deeb, right? Rabbukum yu'addibukum, as he did for the Prophet ﷺ, your Lord will also give you ta'deeb. He will nurture you along the way towards him, and sometimes that will include things that you may not like, but in the long term they may be things that are better for you. And we do this thing with our own children, right? We don't give the kids chocolate every day. We try to get them to eat Brussels sprouts and tomatoes and cucumbers and healthy things. And then sometimes we will treat them with a treat, right? And the treat should be the occasional thing. It's not the thing that you get all the time. And we believe that's better for the children, right? Because we don't want them to be spoiled. So these sort of same terms also apply to the believer. Allah doesn't want you to be spoiled in the sense that you're only pleased with him when he's pleasing to you. But he should be pleasing to you in all circumstances. So he also has a very important section here that I want to go over briefly. He says, يَا قَوْمْ تَابِعُوا حَتَّى تُتَابَعُوا اخْدُمُوا حَتَّى تُخْدَمُوا تَابِعُوا الْأَفْضَلِيَّ وَالْأَقْدَارَ وَاخْدُمُوهَا حَتَّى يُتَابِعُكُمْ وَيَخْدُمُوكُمْ ذُلُّوا لَهَا حَتَّى تُذُلَّ لَكُمْ أَمَا سَمِعْتُمْ كَمَا تَدِينُ تُدَانُ كَمَا تَكُونُ يُوَلَّ عَلَيْكُمْ أعمالكم الحق عز وجل ليس بظلام للعبيد يجازي على القليل بالكثير الصحيح لا يسميه فاسدا والصادق لا يسميه كاذبا. And this is the very next line in English. He says, "O my people, follow so that you may be followed. Serve so that you may come to be served. Follow the ordainments and decrees, al-Aqdiya wal-Aqdar, and serve them so that they may come to follow you and serve you. Submit to them until they submit to you. Have you not heard the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ? As you pay allegiance, so shall you receive allegiance. كَمَا تَدِينُ تُدَانُ, according to how you are, so shall authority be conferred upon you." So usually when this discourse, follow so that you may be followed, serve that so you may come to be served, it means in order to be a proper leader, and this is true, you have to learn to be a proper follower first. If you were never a follower in life and you're always looking to be the leader, you're not going to be a good leader. Because if you don't know what expectations there are for the follower, then how are you going to be a proper leader? Then it becomes more about the ego. And leadership is there because it's a necessity, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts some people in a position where they have to help others. And so the leader is actually the servant, and not the one who's kind of an overseer or overbearing upon the follower. And then the hope is that if the follower is true in their followership, then one day they too will become a leader. And that's what he's saying here. Follow so that you may be followed. Serve so that you may come to be served. But here he's talking about al-Aqdiya wal-Aqdar. So follow the qada, serve the qada. And that means whatever circumstance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you in life, serve that particular circumstance. Maybe Allah didn't make you wealthy, and so serve the circumstance of not being wealthy, and maybe Allah gave you something else, and that's where He wants you to be. Maybe Allah didn't give you good health, maybe He gave you a chronic illness. Then serve that particular circumstance. There are lessons that you're going to be learning, and gifts that are to be received that may be unique to you in your particular circumstance, and that's true for everybody. Everybody's unique in a sense, and we're all the same at the same time. So we're all the same in the sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give us something that's going to be a trial and tribulation. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. Surely we'll try you with all of these things, some loss of profit, some loss of life, some loss of loved ones, of friends. All these things are going to happen to you throughout your life. And that's ibtila. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يَقْسِمُ بِذَلِكَ يَحْلِفُ بِذَلِكَ. He swears that this is what's going to happen. And so the reason that some of the Mufassirun said, why does Allah need to swear here? or in other verses, because we don't believe it, unfortunately. So, they say in Arabic rhetoric or balagha that when there's mu'akkidat, when there's many emphasizers to kind of drive the point home, it means you're addressing someone who doesn't really believe it, who doesn't really want to believe it. So, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. You will lose, you'll have hunger, and you'll have fear, and you have all of these things. Surely you will. And now, perhaps for the first time in a generation, we can say on a worldwide scale, we're all feeling that. We're feeling some loss of, at least of our freedom, at the very least, if we're under a quarantine or under a type of social distancing, self-isolation period. At the very least, we're having some sense of loss of freedom. And why are we surprised? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised that this is going to happen. And so let's serve our circumstance. Let's have the proper maqam for the particular circumstance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put us in. And then we will find that circumstance will serve us. And that's what Shaykh Abd al-Jilani say. If you serve it, it will serve you. If you follow it properly, with the proper adab and etiquettes, then you'll find that it will follow you. And rather than it being the master of you, you will be the master of it. That's the whole idea. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes taskhir. He puts things at our disposal if we are up to the task. So we are supposed to be the stewards of the earth. We have been given the amana, right? We've been given this trust over the earth. And so if we are at the level of taking on this amana, taking on this stewardship, then Allah will make us those stewards. And He will make us al-waratha, right? He will make us the inheritors of the earth. But if we are not, then سَيَسْتَبْدِلُ قَوْمًا غَيْرَنَا, then He will find another group to do it. So either we can choose to take up that mantle, we can choose to accept the responsibility of that stewardship by following the ordainments and decrees, as he says here, al-Qadir wal-Qadar, and the commands and prohibitions. So that means the two types of ahkam, lahu al-khalq wal-amr. So al-amr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to do certain things. هذا يسمى الحكم التكليفي. Allah commands you to pay the zakah and pray and so forth. Follow those commands. And there's prohibitions. Then there's al-hukm al-takwini, al-khalq. Allah creates things and He creates everything. And so also to accept that Allah is the creator, and accept His qada and qadar, and accept that He has sole sovereignty over all of the affairs of the universe. That is a core principle, core belief, and should be a core spiritual pinnacle within all of us. Insha'Allah. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. And I'll stop here. Insha'Allah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.